What's up guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And today we're going to be talking about JavaScript if else condition statements. And today we're going to be talking about if, else, and else if. And let's start by creating a simple statement. So we're going to write if, two round brackets, and we're going to write the condition inside of them. And then after we're going to write two curly brackets and then open them. And this is what a pretty simple if statement looks like. Let's go over what's happening here. So we have the condition between our two round brackets, and this is not what you usually write, but this is just so you guys know. And a condition is basically, well, let's say that we had a variable and we wanted something to happen when that variable is equal to a certain value. So let's say that we had, I don't know, a variable that was x and it was equal to 0, and we wanted something to happen when was equal to 1 or is equal to 1. So what we would write is x equal to 1. And so between our curly brackets, we would write the code that we would want to run when the statement is true. So when um, x is equal to 1, we would run this code that would be here. So let's say we would want to log out x is equal to 1 or something like that. And now this obviously wouldn't work because x doesn't equal to 1, and we can make sure by opening this with live server and see if it works. So let's open our developer console and you can see that it doesn't work. And I'm going to go over this one more time. So we have this if, so if, and the condition. So if x is equal to 1, then we're going to console log x is equal to 1. And what we could do is we could do something like this. So we could just do something like this. So let's actually set x to 1 now. So let x and then equal to 1. And now if we go back here, you can see that it worked. This is a pretty simple if statement. Now what we could do is we could do something like this. So if x is equal to 1, then we do this. But then if it doesn't, so else. If it doesn't, and we add two curly brackets, so if our x doesn't equal to 1, then we would console out something like this. So x does not equal to 1. And then let's see if it works. So let's set our x to 0 now, and then go back, and you can see that it says x does not equal to 1. And what you're going to see is you're going to see if statements with three equal signs, and there's actually a difference between two equal signs and then three. So two equal signs, it just means that x is equal to 1, and then three equal signs, it means that x is strictly equal to 1. And there's a difference between them, and if you want to learn about it, then just Google it. But if we go back here, then you can see that it prints out the same answer. And if I set this to 1, then you can see that it's going to print out this. So it still works the same way, but this is a lot better to use. And now let's go over else if. So we can delete this. I'm gonna change this to this. So we can just copy and paste this multiple times and it would still work. And I'm going to change this to 0. So if x is equal to 0, it's going to print out x is equal to 0. And now what we're going to write is else if two round brackets and then two curly brackets. And the reason we're adding two round brackets is because it's not a normal else. It's else, and then also we're adding if, and we need a condition. So the condition would be x is equal to 1, and then we're going to write this. And what we could also do is we can add an else at the end of it. So if x right here is equal to 0, then it's going to print out x is equal to 0, and then this. And what we could do is we can do something like this. So x um, so x does not equal to 0 or 1, but it equals to, and then the x. So it's a lot different now. And let's see if it works. So let's set this to 0. And so let's go here, and you can see it says x is equal to 0. Now let's set it to 1. And now it should say x is equal to 1. But now if we set it to 3 or anything else, then it would say x is not equal to 0 or 1, but it equals to 3. And we can set this to other numbers, so let's do 385. And as you can see, it would still work. And so let's go over what's happening here. So first, it goes over our first if statement. So it sees that x doesn't equal to 0. So then it just skips to this statement, and it doesn't even go over here. So it just skips to this else if. And then now it sees that x doesn't equal to 1, so it skips to the next statement, and then we have an else, so it's just going to print out what we have here, or it's going to execute the code that we have here. But if we had another else if, so if we had else if x equals to, I don't know, 2, then it would go here, and then it would see if it's right or not, and then lastly would go to the else and execute the code here. And now let's do the same thing, but with different variables. So let's try to do the same thing, but with a string. So let's do let name, and that's going to be equal to something. And so we can do something like this. So we're going to write if name equals to nothing, then we can console.log I don't know, person doesn't have a name or something like that. I don't know. Let's see if it works. So you can see that it still works the same way with um our numbers because it's a variable and it works the same way. So we can do something like this. So if actually else if we can do something like this. So name, and then what we could also do is doesn't equal to, and so this exclamation mark, it just means that it doesn't. So if name doesn't equal to nothing, then we can write, um, let's see, so person or person has a name. And then let's see, so it's going to say person doesn't have a name. And then if we set this to something else, so let's add an A, then you can see that would print out person has a name. So it basically works the same way with strings. Sorry, with numbers. So all variables work the same way, and booleans too. So let's say that we wanted a boolean, so true, and then if this equal to true, so true. But then if it doesn't equal to true, or it equals to false, so we can just do this, or it equals to false, then you can see that it would still work the same way. So person doesn't have a name. And if I change this back to, or change this to false, then it would print out person has a name. Now let's go over different things we can use other than equal. So we can use greater or less. So if x is greater than 0, then we would console log, I don't know, x is greater than 0, but then else we'll just copy paste this, x is um, less, or let's use smaller, so smaller than 0, and let's see if it works. So it should print out x is smaller than 0, and let's go here, and you can see that it says that, and now we can set this to something bigger than 0, so I'm gonna just do something random, and now it should print out x is greater than 0, and as you can see, it works. What we could also do is we can add this equal sign to our if statement, or to our greater or less than. So let's set this to 0, and we can do something like bigger or equal to, and then we'll change the text to x is greater or equal to 0. And now what it should print out is x is greater or equal to 0 because, well, x does equal to 0. And let's go here and see if it works. And as you can see, it works. And if we set this to something bigger than 0, so let's do 5, then you can see that it would print out the same thing. And if we set it to something less than 0, so let's do -2, then you can see that it would print out x is smaller than 0. And now let's go over not, or the exclamation mark. So we can do something like if x exclamation mark, two equal signs, so strictly does not equal to 0, then we'll print out x is greater or x does not equal to 0, x is equal to 0. And now let's see what happens. So you can see that our x is -2, so it doesn't equal to 0. So then it would console log this, and then it would skip this. And let's see if it works. So it prints out x does not equal to 0. So there we go. So you can use this exclamation mark to change it from strictly equals to strictly or doesn't equal to the variable here. And now let's go over and. So what that means is basically if x didn't equal to 0, then we would print this out, and then so we could do something like this. So we would add double of these, and then so that would be if x doesn't equal to 0 and another variable. So let's do y doesn't equal to 0 and doesn't exist, so let's actually create it. So let y, let's set it to 8. And so what it would do is it would check that x doesn't equal to 0, and it doesn't. And so this would be true, right? And then next it would check this, so y, if it doesn't equal to 0, and so this would be true too. And so if these two variables or two conditions end up being true, then we're gonna print this out. But then let's say that y was 0, then it's not, then this would be true, and then this would be false. And so this condition wasn't met. So then it would skip to else. Now let's actually set this to something bigger than 0 to 5 and see if it works. And as you can see, it works. Actually, let's add x and y does not equal to 0. And here we could do x or y is equal to 0. There we go. And as you can see, it's printing out x and y does not equal to 0. But then if I change only one of them to 0, so let's change our y to 0, then you could see that it would say x or y is equal to 0. And same thing would go if I change the x to 0. So there we go. As you can see, x or y is still equal to 0, or x or y is equal to 0. And the last thing I'm going to be going over is this. And this is the same as and, but it's or. So if x doesn't equal to 0, then we would print this out. And then if y doesn't equal to 0, then it would print this out. So basically, only one of these conditions have to be met. And for the and, both of them have to be. So let's say that both of these were 0, then as you can see, it would print out x or y is equal to 0. And so it doesn't work. But for this one, so if x or y is equal to 0 or doesn't equal to 0, then we would print this out. And so let's set our y to 0. And as you can see, it would print this out. And so we could set this to something else. So x to 5, then it would still print this out. So for this one, only one of these conditions have to be met. And so for this one, so these two, this and, both of these conditions have to be true. And this is going to be for this video. So if you guys have any questions, then leave a comment down below. Like this video if you liked it. Sub to the channel for more content like this, and see you in the next video.